What's up, guys? Welcome back to Claw in Hand, and we've got our first MSI Claw here, and we're going to go over some initial first look game performance and kind of the design of the Claw real quick as well and get into it. It's certainly launching with its issues, but there are some goods and bads here, so let's go ahead and get into it and take a closer look at the MSI Claw. Now, as far as the model we have here to start with, this is the Intel Core Ultra 7 155H model with Windows 11, the Intel Arc graphics, 1080p 120Hz 7-inch screen. I have the 512GB model here with the 16 gigs of RAM, Hall effect joysticks and triggers, 2-watt speakers in the front. They're actually really good speakers, and a decent battery life I've been getting out of the 6 cell here, and $699, $749, $799 USD. This model was $749. Now, before we get into the game performance, I did say a quick look at the design, and I really like the design of the MSI Claw. It is similar to the Ally, but the more you get into it, there are actually a lot of differences from weight to balance, from the grips on the back, some of the location of the buttons, the additional venting in the back here. It just looks really nice and feels well balanced. Also, the black plastic they have on here is really high quality, really nice. Doesn't pick up fingerprints easily and feels great, and it's a very solid, sturdy feeling device as well. The joysticks feel kind of similar to my Legion Go. I really like them. I like the triggers as well, but I don't love these squishy shoulder buttons, which you might have heard some others talk about. So these Hall effect triggers are really nice on here, and they're working great. And the buttons up here are working, but they're a bit mushy, not super clicky. My left one is more clicky than my right one. My right one's more mushy, and I've heard that in some other videos too. The stiff D-pad as well isn't super great, but all in all though, I do really just love the design and the feel here. But let's go ahead and move on and get into some of the game performance, because it is a little hit or miss here at launch, and I think there's a lot of room for improvement. And first off will be Cyberpunk, because I'll kind of get the worst out of the way first. And I think a lot of this is issues with the way it allocates the RAM, the power delivery, and of course drivers and things like that. But especially unplugged, it's just a really rough experience no matter what I really do with the settings. And I've messed around with all kinds of different settings here for Cyberpunk. And I've went to the benchmark and looked at that a good bit too. Now, plugged in versus unplugged here. So on the left, we've got unplugged. On the right, we have plugged in, and it's a huge difference when it comes to the performance we're able to get here. Just the way the power distribution is working, I guess, with the additional wattage and everything here, it's just really hurting when it's not plugged in when it comes to Cyberpunk, and this isn't the case with every game. And 3D Mark was 3279 and 3586 respectively here, so I was kind of expecting closer performance in game. The Ally got a 3047 plugged in, unplugged I mean, at 25-watt turbo, so I was thinking it would be better here, but it really wasn't. 16 FPS difference here between plugged in and unplugged with the same settings here. Pretty rough for Cyberpunk, and I've seen other people and talked to other creators having a lot of the same issue, especially with this particular game, one that we all do tend to run to test first on these handhelds. Now, plugged in though, we do get quite a bump, again, just like in the benchmark, way more than I think we should normally, and but it still has its stutters and issues and problems, and just isn't a great experience here on the MSI Claw just yet. And there are other games that have given me trouble as well, and another one I do want to look at is Helldivers 2. Helldivers 2 is an odd one. It gets semi-decent performance considering, I guess, at 720p low at quality scale here plugged in. I get a little better performance, well, much better performance on my Legion Go at that, at those types of settings, or at 800p. Unplugged, it kind of breaks and has a lot of issues bringing the clocks back up and just kind of running right. If I restart the system or the game, I'll pop back up into the high 30s here unplugged, but it will do this quite often. And it also, when it does this, doesn't really matter too much about what I do for switching through the different power options. Yeah, it will lower the wattage, especially at super battery, 20 watts and that type of thing. But performance really doesn't change a lot for me if I start running around the game or anything. It just kind of gets locked up at this bad performance in this game and gets stuck that way. It does the same thing in Cyberpunk from time to time. I had the same thing in Hogwarts when I was in that. Like I said, a restart tends to fix it for a little while, but then it just breaks again. And the only real way to keep performance up there is to be plugged in. Again, this isn't every game, but it's certainly an issue here at launch that I am suffering through. I think 4 or 5 games were giving me this trouble. I'm showing a couple here. But there were some good game performers here, Spider-Man Remastered being one of them. I was actually quite surprised when I jumped in, especially unplugged here after what I saw with Cyberpunk and Helldivers 2 first there. that Spider-Man was actually running quite good at 1080p low FSR quality. I thought this was pretty decent, pretty smooth. I hardly ever got a stutter. Some dips from time to time moving around the city, but this was pretty solid and what I would have normally expected from the Intel chip here. Now I plugged this in and a little bump in performance, which I would expect, but nothing crazy like I saw over in Cyberpunk, and very solid. So dock performance and handheld performance, great for a game like Spider-Man. Now an easy to run game like Sonic here, Sonic Superstars, a game I played through at launch, runs great on all the systems really, 120 FPS, and it ran great here as well. I really didn't have any problems. Core clock stayed pretty good, mostly 120 FPS. We had some dips and things here and there that I don't think would be necessary if the system were running better or more balanced, but ultimately no real problems with a game like this either. I also jumped into some Last Epoch here at 720p medium with TAA, and this game for the most part runs pretty good on this chip. I was getting anywhere from in the 70s to 90s in the FPS with these settings. There's definitely room to tweak here, and it was just running overall better, especially not being plugged in. I could increase the performance again if I plug in here, but considering what I saw in Helldivers and Cyberpunk, I was happy to see this kind of performance in Last Epoch when it came to unplugged here. So one of the titles I've been playing a lot lately that at least I can enjoy on the Claw. Now I also jumped into Horizon here. We've got the new game coming out soon, or if depending on when you're watching this, it may already be out, and I wanted to check it out here, and performance was kind of where I expected. I guess it's 1080p medium FSR performance, and of course it's not going to run as well as the Z1 Extreme that I'm used to, but it wasn't too bad, and frame times weren't too bad, and it was playable. But if I plug it in, I get quite a little jump here, much more smoothed out frame times, of course, the way the power is getting spanned out between the CPU and the Arc iGPU here. And yeah, it just runs overall better, of course, when you plug it in here, and cleaner. So it stays playable either way. But it was interesting to see here. It wasn't as bad as Cyberpunk or Helldivers, but it definitely had its little issues here or there with plugged in versus not being plugged in. There's just a lot of room for MSI and Intel to work on balancing out this handheld and trying to get the power delivery where we need it to really keep performance up there. This struggle back and forth between the CPU and the GPU and the hiccups and the lack of performance, you can really see it and feel it as you're going through these games and testing them out. You can turn off CPU boost in the BIOS, which will help a bit on the GPU side, but a lot of these games do also want that CPU power, and it was hindering me in some games. That's something we'll get more into in the future as we get more into more game test here, testing with the CPU boost. We'll test different settings. We'll be testing a lot more games. But we wanted to get a first look out here on some of these games we've been trying out in their first 3 or 4 days with the MSI Claw and kind of what we're seeing at launch in the beginning. It is pretty rough, and I do hope that MSI is going to work hard to improve things and that Intel's working hard on the drivers, because we really do need a lot of improvement here. And the locked out auto VRAM is also a big issue on the system that hopefully eventually we can get something done with as well. But anyways, guys, that's kind of where it's at for the MSI Claw for now. We'll have a lot more videos coming at you really soon. Thanks a lot for coming to check out the video. As always, we really appreciate it, and we'll see you guys in the next one.